Today I have the honor and the privilege on behalf of Dr. Mark Hussey, which is our Dean of College of Agriculture and the Vice Chancellor for AgriLife Research and Extension and the other agencies as well. He couldn't be with us this afternoon, and I wanted to bring his regrets. He did join us for lunch, and we had really a good meeting with everyone and enjoyed this wonderful family here that we've been associated with today. But he did want me to bring greetings and welcome to you, and it's a pleasure to have you today. The occasion is the presentation of the 2012 Texas A&M Distinguished Texan in Agriculture Award, and then a conversation with Roz Rosenthal, which I think you'll mostly really enjoy when we get into that. In 1993, the Texas A&M AgriLife Distinguished Texan in Agricultural Award was established. It is the highest award that we can give from the College of Agriculture and our agencies. And we want to recognize those people that have been involved in agriculture that have gained any kind of unique distinction for their contributions, their outstanding leadership, and achievements on behalf of Texas agriculture, the state of Texas, and certainly beyond there. To date, 25 individuals have been inducted into the ranks of the Distinguished Texans. They include Mary Nan West. Some of you from South Texas would know that she was a matriarch of the San Antonio Livestock Exposition and also a Board of Regent member here at Texas A&M. Governor Dolph Briscoe, which doesn't need perhaps any more discussion about him and all that he did for agriculture. Bo Pilgrim is another awardee. And certainly Ed and Howard Cruzy of the Bluebell Creameries. Today we take great pride in honoring the legacy of a truly distinguished Texan, Mr. E.M. Manny Rosenthal, class of 1942.
Thank you.
Early in life, Manny understood the importance of hard work and dedication, and his family operated and owned businesses, which included Standard Meat Company, which was founded by his father, Ben Rosenthal, in 1935. In 1942, Manny Rosenthal served his country by entering the United States Army, serving as an officer. 3 years later, he returned to the States after his work was done and services were completed in Northern Africa and Europe, and continued his work with the Standard Meat Company. In 1959, he became the president of the company and was named chairman 6 years later. His son that's with us today, Billy, became president in 1983, and later became part of the Sara Lee Corporation. Both Billy and Manny retired from the company in 1988. In addition to his professional endeavors, Manny was also known as an immense philanthropist with countless leadership roles, such as the president of the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra Association, the Arts Council, the Jewish Foundation of Fort Worth and Tarrant County, and many, many more if you read his biographies. He dedicated his time to serve in the community, and the Rosenthals were honored as Philanthropist of the Year in 1994, and has received the Maurice N. Eisendroth Bearer of Light Award, which is the highest honor given to the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. In 1987, the Texas A&M University Rosenthal Meat Science and Technology Center was dedicated to he and his wife, Rosalyn, at a place where his passion for the meat industry is shared daily with Aggie students. With the help of some of my colleagues, Ray Riley and Jeff Savell, I asked some questions about some data concerned with the Rosenthal, we call it Rosenthal Meats Lab or Rosenthal Meat Center. And it was interesting there in that 30 years of operation, some of the things that have taken place there. And I thought you might want to be interested in knowing what some of those data were. And at the same time, I know many of you are involved in there and you visit there every day. But students going to courses in there, 307, 407, 317, 108, 447, 647, 485, 489, 685, 689. All of those have congregated a multitude of students through the years. We did some calculations on those, and students that actually sit in those seats and listen to lectures and receive that training, something like 30,260 undergraduate and graduate students. There's been 300 student workers, which is something that I have a passion for, with student workers to work your way through school, and this gave them an opportunity to do that. And over the years, they've harvested 26,400 head of livestock for research and for sales purposes. We've trained 70 or more junior and senior meat judging teams. Livestock judging teams have also had evaluation in there. Meats animal evaluation teams, resulting in about 500 students that have been trained in there in the art of judging and grading and meat evaluation. Many of those have gone on to careers based upon some of the training that they'd received there. He also Manny talked about serving the industry. He was very, very passionate about that. He put his money where his mouth was in some of these activities that we'll talk about today. But one of the things that's occurred in our Rosenthal Meat Science and Technology Center is research. Over 400 meat science graduate students have gone through the program there. Another 100 or so graduate students have gone through food science and nutrition, animal breeding and genetics, reproduction, and nutrition, because they had to do some of their work in that meats lab to finish their projects and their programs. There are probably 100 principal investigators and professors that have been involved in overseeing projects in these students, to the tune of something like $20 to $25 million of research grants that have flown through there. And that's resulted in over 300 research publications that were refereed. In addition to that, there were many videos and slide sets. Dan Hale sitting here has done a lot of those through there. The education doesn't really stop there, because also for producer groups and industry groups have attended there as well. Beef 101, 706, different seminars, workshops, beef cattle short course. All of those, to my estimations, have attracted about 10,000 producers across the state to go through there. In the area of service that this center has also given us, we've trained youth and youth development through 4-H and FFA contests and programs to the tune of about 12,500. To the community itself, there's been meat sales through there. There's been 400,000 to 500,000 annually that passes through there, to the tune of accumulating about $12 to $13 million in sales through that little sales unit over there over this period of time. Part of those sales were the 19 tons of beef jerky that were made, that received national acclaim by the New York Times. So a lot of the activities there, for the people that put on these courses, with Jeff and Ray and Dan and Davey and Wes and all the others, to the professors and teachers and researchers with Steve and Zerl Carpenter and Russell Cross, and Jimmy Keaton and so forth, all of those have received the benefits of that center that's so appropriately named because of his love for the industry and his love for students. He was also honored a distinguished alumnus at Texas A&M in 1987 and was inducted into the Meat Industry Hall of Fame. The Rosenthals have generously given, in addition to what we see at the center there, to chairs that we have, the Rosenthal Chair, the O.D. Butler Chair, Rosenthal Foundation, all of those things. The presence of the Rosenthal Center, the gift of the Rosenthal Chair, and the gift of the Rosenthal Foundation account has blessed us in animal science, in the animal science section, and the college as well, and beyond, so much it's hard to measure. These three items clearly make our program what it is today, #1 in the nation. It's because of their generosity, the integrity of the family that continues this, and the family unity that they have, that we have so much to be proud of and so much future in front of us. Unfortunately, in 2001, Mr. Rosenthal passed away after complications from a long illness. He's survived by his wife, Rosalyn, Roz as we lovingly call her here on campus, Roz Rosenthal, his daughter and son-in-law, Marcia and John Michael Cohen, his son and daughter-in-law, Billy, Roxanne Rosenthal, and 5 grandchildren. Please join me in celebrating our posthumous honoree of 2012, Texas A&M AgriLife Distinguished Texan in Agriculture, Mr. E.M. Manny Rosenthal.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is a 2-year delayed presentation because we were going to have Roz come in 2010 and to do this very thing. This building wasn't finished by then, and maybe it was good that we waited, but we had a ice storm in the Fort Worth area and we couldn't get you down here, and we just didn't get this back until now. And so we're so glad that you're here with us. And we said that this was going to be a conversation. You heard a lot of the things that were talked about you and Manny and all the contributions. And we thought it'd be just interesting to have Roz come and spend some time with us and visit, and knowing that we've got an audience that's predominantly students that will learn a lot from you today. And I came up about 20 questions. Well, one of the things we were kidding said, if you and I start talking, we'll be here till supper.
Right,
and so we've got to get to the start and stop of this at some point. But I wanted to start off with this this question, and it is this: how did you meet Manny, and how long into the conversation was it before he said something about Texas A&M University?
Very quickly. Very quickly in the conversation. Do you really want me to tell him?
Yes, I do want you to tell.
I really wasn't going to tell you how we met because it isn't the most normal way for everyone to meet. And I usually didn't tell anyone how I met because he really picked me up in the movies. If you want to be perfectly honest. And he was sitting next to me because I had a friend who said, I don't like to sit next to strangers, so I sat down next to Manny. Didn't know he was in uniform. It was really interesting because it's not all lit up in a movie. But anyhow, we had, when you hear the movie, you're going to laugh because the movie was Bambi. And he had gone to dinner with some friends, and they wanted to see the movie that we have 2 theaters in Trenton. Trenton, New Jersey, by the way, is the capital of New Jersey, but our Trenton is very small. It's not a big city. And we had one theater next to the other theater, right next to each other. Manny had seen the movie in the next theater, so he went to see Bambi. And he's sitting there next to me, and all of a sudden, this voice says to me, do they always have a double feature? I said, no, just because they raised the price from probably 25 cents to 50. And it was a terrible double feature, but the other movie, the good movie, was Bambi. Fine, we got that over with. And then he said, I am from Fort Worth, Texas, and believe me when I tell you, I didn't know Fort Worth, Texas from anywhere in the world. I was 18 years old, and I was not away at college. I was at Trenton State Teachers, which was 7 miles from my home, and I commuted. I didn't stay at the college. And, and of course, I'd never heard of. Then he said, right away, he said, and I'm a graduate of Texas A&M. I just graduated in June. And I thought, that's nice. If you thought I knew what Texas A&M was, I did not. I have learned a lot over the years. And I do want to tell you all something interesting. When I came to see A&M with Manny in 1946, it is so gorgeous now, but when I saw it, it looked like a factory. I mean, it was just, I thought to myself, my goodness, this doesn't look like any of the Eastern wonderful schools that I knew of. But anyhow, that's how we met, and it wasn't too long before I did hear a lot about Texas A&M.
And first of many trips down here, of course.
We did.
So you guys, Manny went off to war.
Yes.
And you said you waited 3 years for him to come back from World War II.
Imagine that, everyone.
And then you got married and moved to Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
How were the early days of working in a family business?
Well, I didn't work in the early days. I worked...
We'll
get
being
to
in
that.
a business, yes,
Huh?
yes. No, just being in a business or coming back and him being a family business.
Oh, well, it's a cute story, and I didn't relate to that today at lunch, but when Manny came back, and of course he had been dealing in tons and tons of meat and lots of things during the war days, because he was in a quartermaster refrigeration unit, which was the first time in the history of the United States Army they actually had men who were trained in meat and in some way connected. And he'd been, dealing in big numbers of things. And his father brought him down to size very quickly and said, "You're going to cut meat. That's what you're going to do." So he started cutting meat. And I remember telling his father that he was very sad that he couldn't do more than just cut meat. He really wanted to go sell product. He didn't want to, work there and cut the meat. I used to call him my educated butcher, which his father did not like, by the way. But he was the college graduate in the meat science business, meat science course. And that's about my earliest connection with Manny was when we started to build a plant. Mm-hmm. And that was a very exciting venture.
What year was that?
In 1948.
48.
Yeah, I think it was 48. We built a new plant because my father-in-law was in a small little cooler sort of situation where he did his meat cutting. And he shipped his meat, by the way, in barrels with ice. Mm-hmm. And that, his grandfather, Manny's grandfather, had worked for Swift & Company and in Chicago, and that's how they used to, in fact, his grandfather thought it was the craziest thing he'd ever seen to ship meat in barrels with ice. He just thought that was bizarre. But when Dad Rosenthal started, and he was in the wholesale meat, which was for hotels, restaurants, that sort of thing. And Manny said, "This is not for me. I have to have a plant. We have to build a great big plant and get going." So we did, and it was wonderful.
We may not, we may not do this in order, but I know one of the things we talked about even at lunch, you talk about customers and serving customers and how important people relationships are. And I know there's several stories you have about that, but tell us a couple of those things about importance of people in your lives, and both you and Manny, and how you related and how you help customers and how important that has been.
Well, I did learn a lot in 1965. We were married in 46, so you can see I had a bunch of years in there that were very wonderful, without worrying and without thinking. But in 65, we had a great big crash in our business. And to all you young people, I do have to emphasize that Manny never gave up, even though we went down to a zero net worth. That's pretty low, everybody. Zero net worth in business. You're not very stable. But anyhow, Manny started in where we found Steak and Ale, who became a big customer of ours, by kind of a fluke, but it was a good fluke. And should I tell them that story?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Steak and Ale had started their business. We were like 3 years into our crash. And Manny met a couple that came from Cleveland, Ohio, he was an entrepreneur. And Manny said, "Let's take them to Steak and Ale on Shady Oaks Lane," which was the only Steak and Ale we knew. We had been taken by the Pizza Hut people to that Steak and Ale, maybe a few months before. The man said to Manny, "Would you mind getting me a franchise in this company? Because I'm going on to Mexico." Manny said, "I'd be delighted." Went to Dallas, called up Steak and Ale, Harold Deem, who was the vice president, said, Mr. Rosenthal, we don't franchise. Well, anybody else, I think, would have said thank you very much and hung up. Not Manny, he said. And we had no, we used to be in the very fresh meat steak business, but when we had the crash, we did away with anything that was expensive. So Manny said to himself, I think I'd like to talk more to him. And he said, would you mind, if I visited with you just for a little bit? And Harold said, I'm going to Steak and Ale on Shady Oaks Lane. Do you know it? Manny said, very well. 2 times, but that was all right. He met him, and Harold Deem said, I'll give you 10 minutes. And as I said today at lunch, no one, Manny never said hello to someone in 10 minutes. It would have to give him much more time. And an hour or so later, they were still talking, and Harold said to Manny, I'd like you to meet our president, Norman Brinker. And I don't know how many of you have ever heard his name, but that was the finest man in the restaurant business that I do believe I have ever met. Not that I've met all of them, but he was just delightful. We met him that evening because Harold said, I want you to meet our president. And we met him at another Steak and Ale, by the way. And in the conversation, Manny told him exactly what our situation was as far as to a zero net worth. And Mr. Brinker said, I'd like you to show me some steaks. Manny said, well, I don't have any meat. And Mr. Brinker said, well, I'm sure you could get some meat in. And he said, well, I could, except I can't pay for it. I have no credit. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking his heart must be breaking saying these words, but it was okay because Mr. Brinker immediately said, you get the meat, I'll pay for the meat. I want you to cut me steaks. And Manny did. He gave 2 weeks age, cut the meat. And guess what? We won. They had a contest for the other purveyor and for us, and we got the contract. But they were going to build a commissary. So you can imagine, I said, kids, I said, and I say this all the time, that anything that happens to you, I feel happens for a reason. I just think, and in our case, it really happened, it was a blessing in disguise that we went into this terrible zero net worth because we learned to be better business people. I think it was a great lesson even for my son, Billy. My daughter was going off to college, and here we were with no funds. However, Manny did send money to his friend and said, put this money in your bank account. And when my daughter gets to St. Louis, she went to Washington University, and she, of course, had said immediately, Mother, I don't have to go to Washington University if this is a bad time for Daddy. I said, no, we're not talking about that. You're going. And that's how we sort of lived those first few years.
By the way, one of the things, because Jeff, I'm not sure they even know who Steak and Ale was, but Steak and Ale was a steak chain, a restaurant chain that started in the late 60s. And when Dad first went over there, I believe there were only 6 Steak and Ales at the time. And Steak and Ale grew quite a bit to where there were, I believe, 400 or 500 Steak and Ales. And today there are 0 Steak and Ales. And the people that worked at Steak and Ale, a lot of the folks, we say they graduated from the school of Norman Brinker. And a lot of these young managers went on to start their own restaurant chains. Houston's was from somebody that worked at Steak and Ale. There was Outback Steakhouse, which were 3 fellows from Steak and Ale. But there were quite a few people. And then, of course, Mr. Brinker went on to build Chili's. And that was his last major food chain that he did grow. But it was as Mom said, it was an opportunity that came out of nowhere for Dad to go over there. And one of the things we talked about is my dad could always spot an opportunity. Sometimes they were good and sometimes they weren't so good. But this one worked out well, and he saw the opportunity, and when he met with Mr. Deem, he spent about an hour with Harold telling him the story and what he thought he could do. And Dad could spin a story. He could really tell you. He was a smart man. He was a really intelligent guy. And he was able to tell the people at Steak and Ale what they were buying today. And at that time, if I could, Jeff, just because it might be interesting to you, is that their supplier at that time was buying U.S. good materials. And Dad looked at that and he said to Norman and to Harold, "You're not buying choice meat. We could help you right there just to get you choice meat." But also, Dad had an idea. He had seen something where where you could take these choice meats and he would age them for 21 days, but he would also pin the meat. And Dad was one of the first ones to take choice meat and pin it. What people had done at the time were taking the lower grades of beef and pinning them. And it's hard to make something tender that's tough, but it's a lot easier to make something that's tender, more tender. And that was the big thing that he was able to introduce to Steak and Ale at the time. And then the next thing he did is as Steak and Ale began to expand, he needed to find a way to package this product. And in the early 60s, they were just coming out with Cryovac. They would vacuum package the fabricated cuts, but they weren't vacuum packaging steaks. And the concern at that time was, how can you expose so many individual pieces and put it back into a vacuum package? Because it would be exposed to bugs or whatever. And Dad said, "Well, I'm going to try it." And he got with Cryovac, and they said it wouldn't work, and Dad said it would work. And he said, "You'll have too many leakers." So he said, "How many leakers are you getting?" He said, 5%. Well, he said, "Well, let's just double bag the product." So he double bagged it. He says, "If we're getting 5, now we double bag it, we'll get 2.5% leakers." And that was how that got started, and that really did work. And it worked so well that Cryovac decided they'd come up with a new package, and that was called the barrier bag. And that came out of the double bagging. And so these were some of the things that Dad, I'm sure, learned from his time here and what he could do and take things to the industry that helped him quite a bit and really became standards of the industry. And to this day, we still vacuum package steaks and we still pin meats. And so it was a great beginning, and that was 1969, actually, when we cut our first steaks for them. But we never probably would have gotten to where we are today. You probably wouldn't have ever received any contributions to A&M if it hadn't been for Norman Brinker. So Norman helped us quite a bit, and and what Mother said is so true. She talked about this earlier today. There was no stopping my dad. There was no barrier, no wall too great for him to climb. And he did have a lot of tenacity. And he kept moving along and moving along and moving along and built a great company.
What was we talked a little bit at lunch about you working there. Because the building, you got the building built and you started, and you actually went down there, and some of the people working there thought you'd last about 2 weeks.
Well, when we had the great crash, is when I went to work, and Manny said to me, "Will you come help me?" And I said, "Well, I'll probably be 2 arms and 2 legs because I don't know too much about this, but I certainly will come and help you." And they put me in the invoicing department of Standard Meat Company. And of course, I didn't know an adding machine from any machine. And I do want to tell you that the adding machine I had really belonged in the Smithsonian Institute.
Already.
You have never seen such an adding machine. It was a Frieden, and it was this big, and I really had to learn how to work this. I did, and I learned how to type the invoices. And I will tell you that I enjoyed every minute. The girls that stayed on with us. And by the way, when Manny told his employees that he had this terrible problem, and this is what happened, And he said, anyone that wants to leave, I will give a letter of recommendation, no hard feelings. 2 of the steak cutters actually left. They probably saw the handwriting on the wall that we weren't going to be cutting steaks.
We may have had 4 steak cutters.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Half our workforce.
Well, just 2 of them left. Well, we had more employees.
No, I'm just kidding.
This is one of my son's jokes, everyone. There were more than 4 employees at Standard Meat. But anyway, we
6.
actually...
No, I'm kidding. No, I'm teasing. Go ahead.
Leave her alone. You just ignore him. Just keep going.
Oh, dear. It's hard being a mother of an older son. Anyway, it was a tremendously fine experience, everyone. Don't be afraid if things happen to you, because if you just keep plugging, and we didn't take bankruptcy, and we just decided we were going to hang in there. Actually, my husband went to work for his cousin in Dallas, and he was there about 10 months, and I called him one day and I said, Manny, if you don't come home, the doors are going to close. I cannot keep them open. Billy was not with us then, he was in college. And I knew that it was going to happen if he didn't come home, and he came home. We had an assistant to our certified public accountant. Certified public accountant left. He had diabetes, and he said to Manny, I will have a stroke if I stay here with this going on. Manny said, fine, goodbye. The assistant to him, and you won't hear this many times in your life, but Janice said to Manny, I can take care of the accounting. I know enough to do it. Don't hire a certified public accountant. And Manny did not. 6 months into our crash, as I called it, Manny said to Janice, I'm going to give you a raise because you're doing the work of a certified public accountant. And she said, Mr. Manny, I know better than you that you can't afford it. So don't even think of it. That is the kind of spirit that was all around us. His secretary wanted to stay and work for nothing, and Manny said, oh, no, I couldn't do that. She left. But we were very fortunate and quite beautifully blessed by a wonderful team of people who stayed with us and worked with us. Manny said there are not going to be any chiefs. We're all going to be Indians. I drove a truck, I want you all to know. Scared me to I don't know where, but I drove it, and it was a big truck. It wasn't just a little pickup. It was a big truck. Had to go pick up some bread or something for what they were doing with a giveaway for the ground meat. But anyway, a little filler. Anyway, that's a giveaway. Anyway, and when I came back, I said, that is my last experience on a truck. No more driving a truck. But I did learn a lot, and I had such a good time. I said I should pay them because I had such a good time working there. It was just full of such a spirit.
So what did you do with the paychecks?
Oh, I was paid every week for my week's work, and I put my check under the mattress because I knew I couldn't cash it. We didn't have a lot of money. So I thought, why should I cash my check? I'll just put it under the mattress. And I did eventually, probably 6 months later, probably did put it in the bank. But Manny tried very hard. Billy, however, was our runner back and forth. By the way, he had wanted to quit work just when Manny had this great crash. He didn't know we had the great crash. And Manny said to him, well, Billy, I was going to have to fire you anyway. So, fine, you can go swim and go ride the car and do whatever you want. It's over. The next morning, he got up, didn't say a word. He was driving his grandfather's car. He got up, drove to the office, and said, Daddy, I'm here. What can I help you do? So he became, I used to not be able to tell that story. I used to sort of fill up with tears, but it was a beautiful thing and a good learning experience for for Billy. He was 14 years old, and really had a pretty good life up until then. But anyway, a lot of things were learned by it. It was a good experience for us all.
Well, obviously things turned around.
Obviously.
And, and you guys have done, quite well. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and it was something that you told me at an event somewhere, and you said something about Manny taught us to give. And I'm not talking about financial, I'm talking about giving yourself and things. What do you think that means when you talk about giving and serving and things? Because your resume is full of those things.
Yeah, that's true.
How has that impacted your life of helping people?
Well, it's really interesting. I feel very, very proud that we got to the point where we could give. And I don't know, it's just made me feel good. Mm-hmm. I think giving is one of the nicest things that people can do. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, whatever you give. It can be as much as $1. But I think it enhances your life when you can give.
But the boards you guys have served on.
Yes, well, that was...
And so many things in the Fort Worth community and so many different places has just been remarkable.
Yes,
on that.
it is.
How did you ever find the time to do that?
Wasn't very difficult.
Well, that's good.
You didn't need a lot of time to do it. Uh-huh. You just thought about it, and you thought, well, I can do that, and that's what I did.
Yes. Let me comment on the giving, though. Jeff, I think the Rosenthal family always liked to give. And even when we didn't have money, my grandfather, if it was $1, he would give $1. It was something that had a huge impression on me, and I think it did on my father as well and my mother. But the idea of giving is so important, and I think that it's hard to teach people to give. I think you learn by observation, I guess, is in giving. And one of the takeaways I would propose to y'all today is think about giving back to this school or giving back to your communities or whatever, because it does come back to you tenfold. And Dad used to always say he got a lot of pleasure out of giving. It was more fun for him to give than it was for the people that were receiving the gift. And I think that it's very true. There are a lot of people out there that don't know how to give, and they never will know how to give, and they never will want to give. And it's sad because there are a lot more people out there that have the dollars to give, have the income and the assets. And I think it's important when you graduate, even when you're here, to give something back to this school. I know that my kids all gave something to their universities, and I was so excited to see them do that because it's important. So just for what that's worth, I think...
something else was brought up earlier was on integrity. Because you made a comment about how even you hear of things long after the fact when you talk about the business and how important integrity. And that was one of the things I wanted you to share with students too, the role of integrity. Billy said something too on that, but Roz, go ahead. I mean, you guys talk about how important is it in business? You dealt with integrity all the time and importance
all the time,
of it.
Right?
So how important is that in the business world?
I think the fact if you make a good name for yourself, I think as Billy always puts it to his children, he said it doesn't cost you anything. You just have to do that yourself to be a person with integrity. I do know this, that when we owed people money, you realize, during this great crash, and we had a time where all the creditors came together, and I said to Manny, it's like coming to your own funeral, walking into this room with all these creditors sitting there, and you don't know if they're going to want to sue you or not, but because of Manny's integrity through his whole years of doing business, nobody wanted to do us any harm. They all wanted to stay with us. Even the highest one that we owed the most money to. I'll never forget the cryovac man, where Manny did, use the cryovac. He said to Manny, if a good Catholic man's prayers will help a nice Jewish man. You've got my prayers, Manny, and don't worry. Of course, that was like, I think we owed him $3,000, which was a lot of money in those days. But I noticed that because of the integrity that was throughout our business, and Norman Brinker, again, his name will come up because he said to me at one time, he only trusted 2 people in the meat business, and one was my Manny, one was Standard Meat Company, and another person out in California. That's because he had a good name. Our neighbor was the president of Southwestern Bell Telephone, and he said to Manny one day, Manny, you've always paid everybody. You never caused anybody any trouble financially, so don't worry, you'll get them all paid off, but just take care of yourself. So I will tell you this, folks, I just think most of you probably know this, that honesty is still the best. It just does everything tenfold. So, and I do feel very proud of my husband and my son, the way they did business.
I think too, Jeff, Dad taught this to everybody that worked. There's a lot of A&M graduating students that have worked for Standard Meat Company. They've all been great people to have. And I think one of the things he did teach was that idea of integrity and reputation. And Jeff asked an earlier question about partnering and with your customers and so forth. And the best way to have a great partner is to be honest with them, his mother suggested. And if you carry that reputation with you into seeing your customer, you'll have a great partnership for a long time. And we have lost a few customers over time, but it's never been over anything that was done wrong. It was something that probably on price, and that happens. You can't always be the lowest price guy. In fact, that's one of the other things that Dad learned when we had our problems. And this used to be a thing in the industry, that if a supplier A was selling it for hamburger meat for $1 a pound and you wanted that business, you'd sell it for 98 cents a pound. And then if that guy heard you were selling it for 98 cents, he'd sell it for 96 cents. And before you know it, you're not making any money. So one of the things that Dad always preached to us in the business was, if you know your costs, you know what to sell it for. And that has always worked. And I'll tell you another thing too that I think sometimes is stressed too much, and that's the bottom line. Everybody talks, we've got to make that bottom line. Well, bottom line will come if you do the things right. If you take care of your customer, if you take care of the people that produce the products, you take care of your management team, you're efficient in the way you do produce the product, and you know what to sell it for, at that point, you're going to make money. But I think too often people work on a selling price from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. And so I guess my suggestion is, know your cost, be a good partner, just maintain the best reputation you possibly can in your particular industry.
We stuck with every purveyor that we ever did business with, regardless of we got no bids from anybody, except we just stuck with everybody that we had done business with. And we paid, if we couldn't pay cash, we didn't buy it. That was another thing in our business. And we didn't do it. Western Union, took out our Western Union system. And I called them and I said, why are you taking out our Western Union machine? He said, because you didn't pay your bill. I said, okay, we'll do without you. Thank you very much. Hung up and said to everyone, write letters. No more Western Union. We didn't have any computers in those days.
Yes. Well, you talked about one of the things that made me think about that in kind of Manny and your love of education. And obviously, Texas A&M is great love, but Texas A&M is not the only love, because you guys also work with Conrad Hilton School of Hotel Management.
Yeah, well, yes, Manny
at University of Houston. And
right.
I know at
Glad you thought of that.
University of Texas at Arlington did a lot of business stuff. Tell us about the commitment to education in general, higher education or any kind of education.
Well, Manny started the business at UTA at Arlington, which was, he went to them and said, you know, I think it would be a good idea if you had some of the business people come and talk to the business students. And they incorporated that into the school. Manny was the first president of that group. And they took a lot of the business people in the community. Norman Brinker was one of them, and so many others. But also this Conrad Hilton was quite interesting. I mean, we watched them grow. We were invited to a dinner which was done by all of their students and served by them, and it was absolutely exquisite. And Manny, of course, taught there. So it was just, he always felt this was so important.
Well, what I think was so great about that, it wasn't just the meat science, which obviously the meat science at Texas A&M was the interest, but he had this business interest at UTA, and he had this, you know, more of a broader hotel and restaurant training activity. And there used to be a lot of guys from Standard Meat, Joe Peperato, and a bunch of those guys would go down to Houston. And you'd read about that in the magazines. I remember young, you'd always see about all these guys that were helping
We had
out.
Seminars, by the way, at Standard Meat Company for the steak and ale managers that all came to see, you know, how we do the steaks and had lunch with us and all of that. And I want to tell you, we had so many Aggies at Standard Meat Company that we got a toilet seat that was an Aggie toilet seat at our plant.
That's remarkable.
To honor the Aggies.
It was actually the UT graduate that bought the toilet seat.
It was.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It was. But, you know, Billy was a UTA graduate, believe it or not.
UT.
I mean, UT, Austin. And Manny tried, of course, I don't think any of these fellas would know and girls would know, but Dr. Butler. Manny took Billy down here, I think 3 different times, and Dr. Butler took Billy through all the meat science classes and the packing house and the whole 9 yards. And finally, after the 3rd time, Billy said, Mother, I don't want to hurt Daddy's feelings, but I want to go to University of Texas at Austin. I said, well, just tell him. And that was the end of it.
So he cut me off. That was the end.
Yes.
Actually, he said he had a good course at University of Texas.
I think he did. He's done well. Yes, it's good. And I think we've talked about that before, Kitty, when you came during that time period. It probably was a little bit further than the warehouse look, but not much more on that. It looks
well,
quite
we had,
different.
you know, when I came down here, they still had the barracks from World War II.
Oh, I didn't realize
and,
that.
And those were the dorms. And I thought, nah, I don't think so. And as we talked a little bit, we teased a little, it was they didn't have any female students at the time. I think they came, no, not in 67 when I came down here.
Yeah.
Was it 67 or 68 they
started what?
Well, there weren't very many even at that
females.
time. There
wasn't enough to go around.
What did you say?
Larry said there wasn't enough to go around back then. Well, right now, our freshman class in animal science are 85% female, so you'd be fine now.
85%.
Just think about it this way. If I hadn't gone to Texas, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet my wife.
That's
right.
Good.
That's right, Roseanne. And what I love is her daddy was an Aggie, so you had these 2 Aggie, you know, parents that begatted these Texas Longhorns, but that's all worked out, too, on that. And I love, this is the story of Roseanne, because the hurricane came up and you had to land the plane because your father was here. And I remember getting the call, and it was at the College Station Med Center, which is just a couple blocks from the house. And I rushed down there, and there's all these evacuees from South Texas. And Roseanne said the problem she had was her father was sitting there trying to, when I asked him something, he kept telling him his class year. I said, I understand that. You know, he was in the land, you know, here, and he was like, hey, I'm class. Yeah, well, you know. So
it was kind of unusual that they had to land at A&M
Yes.
But that was the closest
Yes,
place.
he thought he was coming home on that.
My husband, who was a good Aggie also, but he said, I know that David Krumholtz wears burgundy underwear.
Oh.
Didn't get a laugh from you all on that one.
They're
Maroon.
Huh? Maroon, excuse me, maroon.
Yes.
You don't know what burgundy is? Aha, maroon.
It's an acceptable color, probably range on that. A couple of things, we'll kind of get to the end. I know it's time to start kind of winding
Do you
down.
think they have any questions?
Well, I don't know. I think we may have a possibility for any questions on that. I'll tell you what, formulate that. We'll ask one or so. If anybody has any questions, start coming up or something where we can at least get where you can talk to Roz or somebody shout it out. You know, as you look now at your point in your life where you've had obviously successful children and their spouses.
Lovely children.
And successful grandchildren and their spouses.
Beautiful grandchildren.
As they're coming in great-grandchildren now. And things
Excellent
like, excellent.
Great grandchildren.
They just get better as they go, don't they?
Oh, yes.
Reflect back on that as a girl and growing up in New Jersey and ended up down here, and you've seen this progression of people. Did you dream that when you were a little girl that you'd end up in Texas with this whole group of people?
Oh, my goodness, no. I never knew where Fort Worth was when I was growing up.
Yes.
As I told you all when I started, never knew what Fort Worth was, and I never knew what Texas A&M was. But I learned very quickly. I love Fort Worth, Texas, and I love Texas. I loved where I came from, too, by the way. But I think the improvement at A&M is remarkable. It's just amazing to me. I don't even think of what it looked like. I just now say it's just so beautiful. And you do so many wonderful things in the meat science business. I was just discussing with Jeff that when Manny came to A&M in 1936, I guess it would be. 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 38, I had to count on my fingers. 38, he came and he talked to the president of the school, and this is a true fact, isn't it?
I think what it was, I think what you're talking
They
about.
didn't have a meat science.
Well, they had a course, but no whole curricula is probably what that was. Yeah. He couldn't get a degree in meat science.
That's
what it was.
And he wanted that. He wanted meat science. Are you all in the meat science department?
They're primarily animal science, so kind of broad as far as some of our undergraduate students, but also other majors too.
Oh, okay. But not all meat.
Well, there's a handful here.
Handful of what?
Of meat heads.
Oh, of meat heads.
We're slowly converting them. Go ahead.
Okay,
keep going.
so you're in different schools at the school.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I thought you were all in the meat
But he
business.
would have come in, and I think we figured out Animal Science 307 that he took with Mr. Murphy was first taught in 1926. So it would have only, in the meat lab, had only been there for about 3 years when he came, because that was built in 1932, so along in there.
Well,
but I think that's what
you're right.
I think he was wanting to get a degree in meat science. There was no degree in meat science. That would have only been it.
But they did create a degree, didn't they, for him?
Well, and now we have our degrees in the animal science.
No, but I'm talking back
Animal
then for Dad. Didn't they do that for Dad?
Well, I don't. He probably got him convinced to do whatever he wanted to. There's not many of these students that came in and talked to the president when they got here about their degree choice, but only Manny would have done that.
Well, I think the president at that time did it.
Yeah, well,
I don't think
he did.
I don't think Manny was unique to that. I think that anybody that wanted to speak with the president could go.
Yes.
And of course, Manny would not shirk from that responsibility of going up there and saying hello.
Well, I know Manny also.
I'm Manny Rosenthal.
He was quite the entrepreneur, because didn't he also sell milk? Wasn't it the thing where he got the people standing in a line to do something? He went and got some milk and sold them cartons of milk. There's some story.
He said he saw all the registered students hot as can be, and he thought to himself, oh, they're so hot and so thirsty. He went to the same building that's now the Rosenthal building. They had a little dairy section, and he bought the little cartons of milk for a nickel. And he went up down the line, sold it for 10 cents to all the students. Well, they were so happy to see him. That was it. And by the way, he did work a lot at the school. He was the editor of the Battalion, which was Dr. Butler said was the highest paid job on the campus, being the editor. And then he worked at the football games, worked at the concession stand so he could earn money. I said to him, were you ever a little boy? I don't think he ever was a little boy. I think he was born old and busy.
Yes, quite the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Well, I think the discussion we had at lunch also dealt with that whatever the meat was the vehicle that was sold, but it was people relationships that were so important.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what
you know,
Billy
Jeff, I
says.
think that's a good point, and maybe that's where we end this, but there's several keys in business, I think, that make you successful. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. And it's not just your customers that are the people I'm talking about, it's the people that work with you. And sometimes you see these shows on TV and the Donald Trumps of the world, so to speak, and you know, they're tough and they're mean, and that's not the way it really is. I don't think that's the way people can be successful. I think everybody that works in a company is so important. And one of the things that Dad was great, he would, the employees every Christmas would give Dad a gift. And one year they gave Dad a gold helmet. I think it was Neiman Marcus had some deal with the gold helmet.
That's right.
And then Dad would walk down in that plant at least once a day and shake hands, give a hug, give a kiss to all the different employees down there. They all loved my dad. And he knew their names, and they were important to him. And you felt that importance as an employee. And when he would see them, it was a big hug. You know, today the HR department would probably tell you can't do that. I don't believe in that. I still believe in hugs, and I still believe in all that stuff, but that's me. But it's the same thing with your customers. You know, give them a hug, let them know you love them and care about them. But it's a people game, and it's real important as you go further.
Roz, last thing then, now that you've got a room full of students here that are starting, you know, they're in college or getting ready to go out in a year or two or three or something like that, what do you want to send them off with that now that you can look back on your life, can you share with them that you say, go forward and do this?
I had a pretty good life.
You have had a great life.
And I think we all do make our own happiness. I do think that's true. I think I hit on that earlier, which was whatever you do, just be true to yourself. If you're true to yourself, you're going to be fine, and no matter what you're doing. And I wouldn't change one thing in my life. Even going through that crash, which really, it was, everybody in Fort Worth said, oh, poor Manny. You know, and I kept saying, Manny, don't cry about it because people love to hear bad things. Let's just make it okay. We really did not think of it as the most terrible thing that could happen to us. I don't think that, and I just repeat it again, which is, when I said I think everything happens for a reason, I think you'll find that as you grow and you start doing what you're doing and like what you're doing. Be happy with what you're doing. Don't just do something because you have to do it. Do something that you really enjoy doing. And I think the one word, which is to be true to yourself, is what I could say to you. And that's the way I was. I was always true to myself. By the way, I did want to tell you something that we didn't touch on, I don't think we did, which was that when Manny started in the steak business again, and this was after, of course, we had the crash, he went to the customer and said, what is it you want me to do?
That's a good point.
How do you want me to do your steak? And that was the policy we used all from that point on. It was the customer that told us what we should do. And that was it.
Revolutionized
Yes,
business.
yes. Portion control was a big thing at that time too, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think the customer is so important in having those relationships. So
Yes.
Well,
he always had a good relationship with his customers. I think Billy is a true example of having such a nice relationship with his customers. Manny sort of kept people a little bit at arm's length. He was a great one for the person that was his customer. He tried not to get too chummy. Where Billy is probably good friends with a lot of his customers, and even with Norman Brinker, who was truly a good friend of ours. Loved us and we loved him. But he kept a distance. He felt there was that sense of customer-purveyor relationship that he kept. He used to say to me, I can't understand, Rosie, how you can ask Norman Brinker all these questions. I said, well, that's me. You know. But Norman was known as had a touch of Midas, King Midas.
Oh.
Anything he touched turned to gold.
Yes.
And we were part of that.
Yeah, remarkable.
We were very, very blessed, by the way. Pizza Hut the same way, folks. We were making 100 pounds of pizza topping. And Manny said to me one day, you know, if I can make 100 pounds, I can make 1,000 pounds. I'm going up to Wichita, Kansas and meet those boys. Did you all know that the Pizza Hut was started by two brothers who made the topping in the back of their father's grocery store? That's how they made the first topping. And they had a purveyor in Kansas, Wichita. When Manny went up, he said, could I be one of your purveyors? You know, if I can make 100, I can make 1,000 pounds of topping. That's how we got going with Pizza Hut. Mm-hmm. So you have to be you have to use a little initiative and a little, you know, figuring out what would be a good thing for the customer and for yourself. Mm-hmm. And Manny also said, everyone, and I'll end with this, every business has to make a profit. You can't run a business and not make a profit. So he always said to me, Rosie, whatever you're spending, that person should be making a profit. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Thank you.